Lagos has a way of watching without waiting. A child cried, and the city looked through screens, through comments, through shares. This is the story of a girl we all saw and almost forgot. In Lagos, once your story enters the phone, it no longer belongs to you. Step into a world of wonders with Tales with Jenny. Don't forget to subscribe and click the like button. The road knew Amina before anyone else did. Long before her name would be typed into search bars or whispered in comment sections, the road had already memorized her small footsteps, her careful timing between speeding Danfo buses, and the way she flinched at sudden horns. At 9 years old, Amina had learned the language of Lagos asphalt, when to stand still, when to run, when to disappear into the gaps between moving bodies. She slept where the city paused briefly, under half-closed shop fronts, beside abandoned kiosks, near bus stops that smelled of petrol and sweat. By morning, she folded herself away before shop owners arrived, because the road tolerated her presence only at night. In the day, she became a problem. The road raised her without affection, without promises. It taught her that survival was not loud, that hunger could be endured quietly, and that the city never apologized for stepping on the weak. Cars passed inches from her toes every day, carrying people with places to be, lives that continued uninterrupted. None of them knew her story, and the road did not care enough to ask. It only demanded that she move when it moved, stop when it stopped, and accept whatever scraps fell from its endless motion. Amina's parents were gone, but Lagos did not bother remembering how. In the city's economy of suffering, details were a luxury. All that mattered was that she was alone. No adult claimed her, no relative searched for her, no address could be attached to her existence. She belonged to the in-between, not fully homeless, not fully alive to the systems that pretended to help. She washed windscreens at traffic lights with dirty water scooped from gutters, smiling just enough to soften faces, but never enough to invite conversation. Some drivers waved her away as if brushing off a fly. Others dropped coins without looking at her eyes. A few rolled up their windows quickly, afraid of what it meant to truly see her. Amina learned that eye contact could be dangerous. It carried questions she could not answer and expectations she could not meet. So she perfected the art of invisibility, standing close enough to be ignored, small enough to be forgotten. Hunger lived permanently in her belly, a dull ache that sharpened at night, but she had stopped crying for food long ago. Crying attracted attention, and attention did not always come with kindness. Sometimes it came with slaps, insults, or hands that stayed too long. The road had taught her that lesson early too. By afternoon, the heat wrapped Lagos like punishment. Amina's feet burned against the pavement, hardened soles protecting what little childhood remained. She counted buses, not days. She measured time by traffic jams, not clocks. When the sun dipped slightly and shadows stretched longer, the city grew impatient. Conductors shouted destinations like warnings. Hawkers pushed through lines of cars, selling survival in sachets. Somewhere between noise and movement, Amina stood with her plastic bowl, lighter now than it had been in the morning. The road offered no sympathy. It only offered continuity. Around her, Lagos performed its daily ritual of resilience, the loud kind, the kind that celebrated hustle and mocked weakness. There was no space for a thin orphan girl who needed rest. Yet, she endured. She always did. Because endurance, she had learned, was quieter than hope. Hope raised expectations. Endurance only required breathing. When the traffic light turned red, she stepped forward automatically, her body moving on instinct rather than desire. That was when she did not notice the phone lifted in the distance, angled carefully, its lens already deciding what part of her life was worth keeping. The road did not warn her. It never did. As Amina wiped another windshield, her reflection flickered briefly on the glass, a child framed by exhaust smoke and impatience. The camera captured her small voice explaining where she slept, her uncertain pause when asked about her parents, the way her fingers curled tightly around the bowl as if afraid it might disappear too. The road continued its business uninterrupted. Cars revved, horns blared. Life moved on. But something had shifted quietly, invisibly, like a crack forming beneath the surface. Amina did not know it yet, but the road had just released her to a different kind of danger, one that did not bruise immediately, one that came disguised as attention. As the traffic light turned green and she stepped back onto the curb, the phone lowered, satisfied. The road reclaimed her for the moment, wrapping her again in noise and dust. But somewhere beyond the asphalt, her image was already traveling faster than she ever could, carried by invisible roads that did not care where she would sleep tonight, only that she was seen. The phone did not look like trouble. It never does. In Lagos, phones are everywhere, lifted in buses, balanced on palms at traffic lights, pointed at food, faces, accidents, miracles. Amina had learned to ignore them the same way she ignored horns, by pretending they belonged to another world. When the man asked her questions, his voice was gentle enough, almost kind. crouched slightly, as if lowering himself made him smaller, safer. He did not touch her. He did not shout. He only asked where she slept, how long she had been alone, whether she had eaten. Amina answered because answering felt easier than refusing. Because adults with soft voices were still adults, and adults always expected something. The phone stayed raised, steady, patient. Its dark eye watched her without blinking. She did not know that this stillness, this careful framing, was the most dangerous thing about it. Behind the glass, her life became simpler. 9 years collapsed into 60 seconds. Hunger became a caption. Loneliness became proof. The pauses in her speech, the way she swallowed before answering, the way her fingers tightened around the plastic bowl, all of it was captured, trimmed, and packaged. When the man finally stood up, he smiled and slipped her a note into the bowl. Not enough to change anything, just enough to justify himself. He walked away without asking her name, without asking where she would go when night came. The phone disappeared into his pocket, warm and satisfied, carrying Amina with it in pieces, her face, her voice, her exhaustion ready to be passed on. The video found its first home in a WhatsApp group before Amina finished crossing the road. From there, it moved the way gossip always had in Lagos: fast, distorted, hungry. By evening, her face had jumped from phone to phone, state to estate, island to mainland. People watched while eating dinner, while waiting for fuel, while lying in bed beside sleeping children. Some shook their heads. Some cursed the government. Some typed prayers they did not intend to follow with action. Others forwarded without watching till the end. Her image became lighter with every share, less human, more convenient. She was no longer a girl standing on hot asphalt. She was content. She was evidence. She was a feeling. Amina did not feel famous. She felt watched. Strangers began to stop longer than usual. Some asked the same questions again, louder this time, phones already raised. Others promised to come back with help, with food, with school bags. She nodded because nodding was safer than hope. As darkness settled over the city, she returned to her usual spot beneath the shop canopy, unaware that the road had already lost her. Somewhere, her face glowed on screens, collecting sympathy, anger, and attention. And somewhere else, the algorithm, blind, obedient, and endlessly hungry, decided she was worth pushing forward. The lens had found her, and it was not done looking. By morning, Amina's face no longer belonged to the road. It belonged to the city. The video had crossed the invisible borders Lagos respected more than law status, class, influence, and landed everywhere at once. On radio shows, callers argued about her as if she were a policy failure. On blogs, headlines sharpened her pain into outrage. On social media, her image sat between comedy skits and gossip, competing for attention like everything else. People spoke her story aloud in offices and buses, changing details freely, improving them for effect. Some said she had been trafficked. Others said she was pretending. A few claimed to know her. No one actually did. Yet everyone felt entitled to an opinion. The noise was loud enough to feel like care, but it moved too fast to stay. By midday, the first helpers arrived. They came in clean clothes, voices already warmed up for cameras. They knelt beside her, asked her to repeat answers she had already given, corrected her when her words did not land right. They filmed again from better angles this time. They fed her briefly, enough to justify the post. "We'll be back," they said, because promises were easy when the audience was watching. Donations links appeared under her face, captions heavy with urgency and prayer emojis. Money moved quickly, invisibly. Amina watched hands exchange things she could not track, her bowl suddenly irrelevant. She was told to sit still, to smile, to say thank you. She did as she was told. The road had trained her well. As the day wore on, the crowd thickened. More phones. More questions. Some people argued over who had the right to help her. Others argued over who should control the money. Her body became the meeting point of adult ambitions, charity mixed with ego, compassion tangled with competition. Amina was passed from shade to shade, never far from the road, never close to safety. She learned a new rule: the louder someone spoke about helping, the less certain it was they would stay. Every time a camera turned on, her stomach tightened. Not from hunger this time, but from anticipation. Pain, she realized, had become something people expected from her. Something they needed to see to believe. By evening, she was exhausted in a way sleep could not fix. Her voice felt thin, used up. The same questions came again, sharper now, impatient with repetition. Why are you here? Where is your family? What do you want to be? She did not know which answers were correct anymore. The truth shifted depending on who was listening. Around her, Lagos continued its business horns, hawkers, shouting conductors indifferent to the small storm it had created. And still, the phones kept rising. The algorithm rewarded the urgency. Each repost pulled strangers closer. not to protect her, but to participate. That night, Amina lay awake beneath a borrowed roof that was not hers, listening to unfamiliar breathing around her. The noise had followed her indoors, buzzing quietly through screens and notifications. Outside, the road waited, patient as ever. Inside, the city argued over what to do with her. No decision was made. No plan held. Only attention remained bright, unstable, and temporary. And though she did not have the words for it yet, Amina felt the shift clearly. She was no longer invisible. She was something worse. She was valuable. Money arrived without warning, the way rain sometimes does in Lagos, sudden, heavy, and impossible to trace once it hit the ground. It did not come in envelopes handed gently to Amina. It did not come with explanations she could understand. It came in screenshots, account numbers, captions promising transparency, and voices declaring urgency. Adults spoke about figures around her as if she were not present, as if the numbers mattered more than the small body they were gathered for. Someone said the money would change her life. Someone else said it already had. Amina listened quietly, nodding when eyes turned toward her, even though nothing around her felt changed at all. With the money came rules. New ones, stricter than the roads. She was told where to sit, when to speak, what not to say. She was reminded gently, at first that many people were watching now, that she had to behave well. Gratitude was no longer optional, it was expected. She was dressed in donated clothes that still smelled unfamiliar, clothes meant to signal progress. Before and after photos were taken, smiles were requested, then corrected. Wider, someone said. Look happy, another insisted. Her hunger returned, sharp and confusing because the food now came with conditions. Eat here. Say thank you there. Stand beside this person. Hold this banner. The road had demanded movement. Money demanded obedience. Arguments began quietly, like whispers that pretended not to be disagreements. Who would keep the funds? Who would decide what was best for her? Who had discovered her first? Names were mentioned: NGOs, churches, individuals with influence. Everyone claimed responsibility. No one claimed accountability. Amina was moved again. This time not because the road pushed her away, but because adults pulled her in different directions. Each place promised safety. Each place felt temporary. Her plastic bowl disappeared somewhere along the way. No one noticed. It had stopped being useful once money learned her name. At night, when conversations softened and phones rested briefly on tables, Amina lay awake listening to unfamiliar adults discuss her future as if it were a project. School was mentioned. Therapy was mentioned. Adoption was mentioned, quickly dismissed, then mentioned again. Her name floated through the room, detached from her body, like something owned by everyone except her. She wondered when she would be allowed to decide anything again, when to sleep, when to leave, when to be quiet without being accused of ingratitude. The noise outside had faded, but inside, the pressure grew heavier. The road had been cruel, but it had never pretended to save her. By morning, the money had settled into pockets and plans. Receipts were promised later. Explanations were postponed. The cameras returned, hungry for updates. Amina was placed carefully in front of them, cleaner now, quieter still. Progress, they called it. Rescue. She stared into the lens and tried to remember the girl who once belonged only to the road, hungry, invisible, and free in ways she did not understand until she lost them. Money had learned her name, and like everything else that had learned it, it wanted something in return. Amina stopped counting days the moment she realized they no longer belonged to her. Time became something adults used to organize her pickup times, filming schedules, handover dates spoken about in front of her but never offered to her. She was moved the way items were moved in Lagos. Quickly, purposefully, without ceremony, one room blurred into another. One mattress replaced the next. Each place promised stability, and each place ended with the same sentence spoken too late. This is temporary. She learned not to unpack, even when told she could. The city had taught her how to live lightly, but this was different. This was being carried without consent. Every move came with a new set of rules. In one house, she was allowed to speak freely, but only when spoken to. In another, silence was praised as good behavior. Adults corrected her posture, her tone, her memory. They disagreed over details of her past as if it were a script they needed to get right. When her answers changed, because answers do, when survival depends on them, she was warned gently not to confuse people. Consistency mattered now. The truth, she learned, was less important than coherence. The story had to stay clean, even if her feelings did not. Her body reacted before her mind could. Sleep came in fragments. Sudden voices made her flinch. At night, she pressed her fingers into her palms until they hurt, grounding herself in pain she could control. She missed the road in ways she could not explain. The road had been cruel, but it had been honest. It had never asked her to pretend. Here, she was watched even when no one was filming. Watched for gratitude. Watched for obedience. Watched for signs of damage that could be useful later. She began to shrink herself instinctively smaller movements, quieter breathing because attention had taught her it always wanted something. The cracks widened when questions about her future began to sound less like care and more like bargaining. School became a talking point, not a plan. Therapy became a word people liked to use, not an action they took. Adults disagreed openly now, their patience thinned by money and recognition. She overheard her name spoken with frustration. She's difficult. She's not opening up. She should be more appreciative. No one asked what it felt like to lose control of your own story at 9 years old. No one asked if she wanted to stay anywhere at all. One evening, as she was packed into another car with another promise, Amina realized something that frightened her more than hunger ever had. She could no longer imagine choosing. Not choosing where to sleep. Not choosing who touched her head. Not choosing when to speak. Choice had slipped away quietly, without an argument. The road had taken many things from her, but it had never taken that. As the city lights passed outside the window, Amina rested her head against the glass and watched her reflection blur and stretch. The cracks were no longer hidden. They were widening. And she was learning how to disappear inside them. The first sign of danger was not loud. It never is. It arrived disguised as familiarity. Strangers began to recognize Amina before she recognized them. Her name was called softly from across rooms, from car windows, from behind phones held too casually. Some smiled as if they knew her. Some spoke to her with a confidence that unsettled her, referencing things she had never told them directly: where she slept, what she ate, how she cried. The internet had done what it always did best. It had filled in the gaps. Amina learned that being known without consent felt like being followed by invisible hands. Adults around her grew tense, though none admitted why. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Phones were turned face down. Someone mentioned safety for the first time, not as a promise, but as a concern that had arrived too late. The problem was no longer whether people cared. It was that too many people did or claimed to. Attention had multiplied her presence without multiplying her protection. Every post had widened the circle of those who felt entitled to her, and the circle had grown beyond control. She was moved again, this time hurriedly. No explanations, no rehearsed smiles, just instructions. Don't talk to anyone. Don't answer questions. Stay close. The irony was sharp enough to hurt. Silence, once demanded for politeness, was now demanded for survival. Amina complied easily. She had been trained for this. The city lights outside the car felt closer now, pressing in. She watched familiar streets slide past and wondered how a place could feel so crowded and so unsafe at the same time. The cracks widened into fear when a man appeared at the edge of one location. They stayed briefly, a man who said her name as if testing it. He claimed he wanted to help. They all did. His phone stayed in his pocket, which made it worse. He said he had followed her story. He said God had sent him. Adults intervened quickly, ushering her inside, locking doors that had never been locked before. That night, no one slept. The story had left the screen and learned how to walk. After that, protection became reactive. Security measures discussed in whispers. Locations shared with fewer people, then fewer still. But the damage had already been done. Her image could not be retrieved. Her name could not be erased. Somewhere, screenshots lived permanently, waiting to be rediscovered by people who did not know her fear, only her face. Amina felt the weight of that permanence settle into her chest. Hunger had been temporary. This was not. One evening, alone in a bathroom that echoed too loudly, Amina studied her reflection. Cleaner now. Quieter now. Older in ways that did not show in years. She tried to remember what it felt like to belong only to herself, to walk without being recognized, to exist without consequence. The road had once raised her roughly, but it had not branded her. The internet had. And as she turned away from the mirror, Amina understood something with frightening clarity. The world had not rescued her from danger. It had introduced her to new ones. The crowd did not leave all at once. It thinned, quietly, politely, like guests who sensed the party was over and did not want to be caught cleaning up. Messages slowed, calls went unanswered, updates were postponed, then forgotten. The same people who had once demanded daily proof of Amina's existence now assumed she was fine because she was no longer visible. Silence was mistaken for success. Somewhere online, her story was declared resolved without her ever being asked how it ended. Protection grew looser as attention faded. The urgency that had once wrapped around her like a tight net relaxed into routine. Adults returned to their lives, their work, their next causes. The rules remained, but the watchfulness dulled. Amina felt the shift immediately. It was the same feeling she had known on the road when a driver's eyes moved past her too quickly, being dropped without warning. One day she was supervised carefully. The next, she was forgotten in the corner of a room while conversations drifted elsewhere. Being valuable had been exhausting. Becoming ordinary again was terrifying. Promises began to rot. School was delayed because paperwork was missing. Therapy was postponed because funds were still being sorted. Safe housing became a discussion point instead of a destination. Each delay came with reassurance delivered gently, almost kindly, as if tone could replace action. Amina learned to stop asking questions. Questions reminded adults of obligations they no longer wanted to carry. She folded herself smaller, quieter, grateful in the way that asked for nothing. At night, when phones lay dark and the city softened into distant noise, Amina replayed everything she could remember, every face, every voice, every place she had been moved through. She tried to understand which version of herself had been real. The girl on the road, the girl in the videos, the girl discussed in meetings. None of them felt like her anymore. She wondered if being seen so completely had erased something essential, something she could not name but deeply missed. One afternoon, sitting alone near a window, Amina watched dust float in a beam of sunlight and felt a familiar ache return, not hunger, not fear, but abandonment. This one was heavier because it came after hope. The road had never promised her anything. People had. And as the world continued without checking whether she was safe, Amina understood the cruelest lesson of all: the internet never finishes a story. It only leaves it behind. Time did not heal Amina, it simply moved around her. Days stacked quietly on top of one another, indistinguishable except for the small changes adults pointed out as proof of progress. She ate regularly now. She slept indoors. She owned clothes that fit. From the outside, the rescue looked complete. From the inside, something essential remained unfinished, like a sentence cut off before its meaning could settle. Survival had been upgraded, but safety had not. She learned that trauma could be polite. It did not always scream or shake. Sometimes it sat calmly waiting. Loud noises made her flinch. Sudden laughter tightened her chest. When people raised phones near her, even casually, her body responded before her mind could reason. She became alert in the way children should never have to be constantly scanning, constantly preparing to disappear. The road had taught her how to move out of the way. The internet had taught her that nowhere was truly out of sight. Occasionally, someone would recognize her again. Not often, just enough to remind her. A look held a second too long. A question asked carefully, as if circling something delicate. "Are you the girl from that video?" Sometimes they meant well. Sometimes they wanted confirmation, a story to carry home. Each time, Amina felt the old fracture reopen. She learned to deny herself with ease. Saying no felt safer than being remembered. What lingered most was the confusion. She did not know which part of her life she was allowed to mourn. The hunger? The street? The fear? Or the hope that came briefly and loudly, promising transformation. Adults spoke of her future now, shaping it with plans and intentions. But the past was treated like a closed file, useful only when retold for lessons or warnings. No one asked her what she had lost in the becoming. At night, Lagos breathed outside her window, generators humming, distant horns, the rhythm of a city that had never paused for her story. Amina would lie awake and imagine herself invisible in the truest sense. Not unseen because people had moved on, but unseen because she was finally allowed to exist without interpretation. No captions. No meaning assigned. Just a child occupying space without consequence. She did not hate the world that had watched her. Hate required energy she did not have. What remained instead was a quiet understanding, heavy and precise. Attention is not care, and rescue is not responsibility. Stories end where effort does. And some children grow up carrying the weight of being everyone's lesson and no one's obligation. Amina survived. That was the headline the world preferred. But survival, she learned, was not the same as being held. The city had learned her name. The internet had branded it. The world had moved on. But one quiet morning, in a small Lagos community center tucked between dusty roads and brightly painted houses, Amina met someone who seemed to notice her differently. Not as a story, not as a lesson, not as content, just as herself. His name was Tay, a young African man in his 20s who volunteered at the center. His presence was calm, steady, and patient. He didn't ask her to smile for the camera. He didn't ask her to explain the past or perform gratitude. He simply sat beside her on a low bench, offering his hand when she flinched and a gentle word when she looked away. For the first time in years, the rhythm of her breathing slowed. The chaos of Lagos outside could have gone on without touching her heart. Days passed, and Amina discovered that love could be quiet and consistent. Ty taught her games she had forgotten. He read stories aloud, letting her interrupt or question or giggle freely. He didn't record, he didn't photograph, he didn't broadcast. He just showed up. Sometimes he simply listened. Sometimes he laughed at her small jokes, the kind that had survived the internet and the road, tucked away inside her. Each day, Amina's reflection in mirrors began to soften. The girl who had flinched at attention began to trust that someone could stay without taking anything away. By evening, sitting under a mango tree in the center's small courtyard, Amina rested her head on Tay's shoulder and let the silence speak. Lagos roared around them, the streets still indifferent, the lights still harsh, the noise still endless. But here, in this space, she was not a lesson, not a story, not a headline. She was just a girl, just Amina. And for the first time, that was enough. Love had arrived quietly, and in its stead, the cracks she had carried for so long began to heal. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the shadows receded.